For some reason the audio isn't working, please let me know. Dear colleagues and friends, it is a great honor to be invited to speak at the Mother Seed Holy Echmiadzin and before such an esteemed group. I want to thank all those involved in this organization, which I know is a long and complex process. When I was invited to speak, I wondered what I might be able to add to an already impressive lineup of speakers, experts on subjects including human rights, our history, law, faith and spirituality, philanthropy, and politics. I have decided to focus on a subject that I know well, the Armenian religious heritage situated in the modern Turkish Republic. As this audience knows, Turkey is home to thousands of Armenian churches and monasteries, which are traces of the Armenian homeland lost with the genocide of 1915 to 1922. The vast majority of these churches are no longer operational and have lost the communities that worshiped in them. For the Turkish Republic, they remain as traces of an inconvenient past and have suffered from outright erasure to vandalism and neglect and to conversion into mosques. With the current Erdogan regime, there are growing concerns about the fate of those remaining churches. In my short time, I will share some of what I've learned on the ground and offer what have become for me guiding principles in my work in hopes that they may provide a useful perspective on Artsakh. I hope to offer a sense of the challenges, the pitfalls, but also the possibilities and the potential of fighting for Armenian religious heritage. My involvement with endangered Armenian religious heritage began with the Church of Meren, a remarkable inscribed, sculpted, and frescoed Armenian church dating to the 7th century. Meren is situated in a closed and militarized border zone just a few kilometers from the Republic of Armenia. In 2013, I discovered that Meren was in much worse condition than I had thought. A few years before, the south facade of the church had completely collapsed. My study photographs, which were from the early 2000s, showed that the southwest corner of the church had fallen down. But newer internet photographs showed the total collapse of this wall. In February 2013, I mobilized a campaign to raise awareness of Meren. Having contacted UNESCO with no response, I emailed the World Monuments Fund. I sought to get Meren on the World Monuments Watch, self-described as a global program launched to identify imperiled cultural heritage sites and direct financial and technical support for their preservation. The watch list is specifically targeted to save at-risk monuments through short, focused intervention. For example, Hagia Sophia was on the inaugural watch in 1996, and then again in 1998 in response to water damage caused by cracks in the roof and by rising groundwater levels. Meren was successfully listed for the years 2014 to 2017. Meren presented a remarkable set of challenges. The 2015 site visit that we undertook required the combined permission of the Turkish Ministries of the Interior, the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Permits were all obtained with the stewardship of the World Monuments Fund, who also arranged grants from the State Department and more particularly the U.S. Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation and from the U.S. Embassy in Ankara. The project was also endorsed and supported throughout by Osman Kavala, longtime friend and associate. I owe him a great debt of thanks for mobilizing his NGO, Anatoly Kultur, in support of this project, among many others. And as I'm sure the listeners here know, Osman has been unfairly imprisoned on false charges now for 1,410 days. The Meren team included a seismologist, restoration architects, historians, engineers, diplomats, and administrators from all over the world. This team was tasked with assessing the condition of the church, the site and its archaeology, as well as gauging community interest, access, and security. We did visual inspection and documentation, including 3D laser scanning. The team also recommended emergency and long-term measures to be carried out to prevent further failure. While the laser scanning was done successfully, the emergency measures were not implemented during the watch list's prescribed 3-year window, so that the building remains at risk. In 2015, there were cracks separating the north wall from the structure, and I heard from a friend who visited Maran last year that these cracks are widening further, so there is urgent work to be done and more help to be sought. I've also collaborated with the World Monuments Fund at Ani, the ruined medieval city and royal Armenian capital, inscribed in 2016 onto UNESCO's World Heritage List. World Monuments Fund has worked at Ani since 1996, when the site was first placed on the watch list. Since then, they have overseen many projects there, and recent restorations have focused on 2 monuments, the cathedral and the Church of Surpregich, Church of the Savior, in Ani. Surpregich, today a strangely picturesque ruin, is a 19-sided stone masonry building with sculpture, inscriptions, and interior frescoes, which are now exposed to the elements. It's now been stabilized with buttresses, as you can see, and scaffolding allows for access up to the dome and protects workers from rockfall. And monitoring devices gauge its condition and movement, and fragments of carved stone have been inventoried and sheltered from the elements. Simultaneously with this project was another, called Ani in Context, funded by the Norwegian Embassy in the Turkish Republic. This emerged out of talks between Ikonos Armenia and the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research, or NICU, then directed by Karsten Paludan-Müller. World Monuments Fund and Anadolu Kultur also participated in Ani in Context, as did Koç University's RCAC, now ANAN. This collaboration resulted in a visit to Ani and its vicinity in 2013 by a group of international experts. We assessed 21 sites in the region, from churches completely erased from the landscape, churches in various states of collapse, and also we looked at mosque conversions. We used a risk assessment matrix to rate monuments based on the highest priority for intervention. The World Monuments Fund work in Ani will resume late this year, and I expect that more studies and projects and restoration works will be launched, including hopefully at Maran. Additionally, I've given many ongoing projects and organizations that seek to protect and raise awareness of Armenian heritage in the Turkish Republic. Anadolu Kultur, of course, the Hrant Dink Association, Koç University's ANIMED, and many others. So what have I learned in these years, and how might it apply to Artsakh as we consider future strategies for protecting its Armenian heritage? The first thing is, in my view, is that it's important to remain optimistic. We all know how much heritage is tied up with politics, and how interests and pressures of the most powerful often determine the fate of the vulnerable. Sometimes it seems as though heritage is part of the inexorable tectonic shifts in elite power. What I have found, however, is that things are less predictable than one might think. Conditions change fast, possibilities open, and the optics of heritage can be very different from what is happening on the ground. In the 1990s, the idea of work at Maran seemed impossible, unthinkable. In the early 2000s, it took place. The next point I would like to make is the importance of thinking long-term. Matters of heritage are intensely complex and confusing, involving competing interests and ambitions of often diverse stakeholders. There are many games being played, and to be frank, some people out simply for personal gain. In the midst of what can seem both agonizing and agonistic, I have learned to train my sights on the long-term structural health of the monuments. Maran, Ani, Dadivan, Amaras, Hagia Sophia, Tsitsianava, any other church exists not just for us, but for our children, our students, for future generations, and future congregations. Remembering this can assist in deciding on the best short-term strategies. It might be that what the churches need right now is life-saving. On this point, Armenian liturgy holds an important lesson. In Armenian tradition, recorded early in the late 10th or 11th centuries, but probably dating to much earlier, a church once desecrated required re-sanctification in a special consecration rite, known as the canon for the consecration of the church having been polluted by the lawless and for the re-establishment of the altar that has been disturbed. This rite requires the bathing of the church walls, doors, and floors, the re-sanctification of church instruments, furniture, vestments, and curtain, and the removal and reinstallation of the altar. This powerful rite opens with a recitation of Psalm 78 in its entirety, a psalm which, as you know, remembers the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. The first verse is, "O God, the heathens have entered and polluted your holy temple. They have made Jerusalem into fruiterers' nets." I hope we will come to use this rite, which was used most assuredly after periods of occupation in the 8th and 9th centuries. But in order to undertake it, we must have standing churches. My third point is that bigger is not better, or UNESCO is not the answer to everything. As much as we should be optimistic, I have seen real results from working with smaller NGOs, with individuals, making deals, making friends in unlikely places, and working under as well as over the table. Along with my esteemed colleagues, Rachel Bushgarian, Hedman Wadenkoff, and Simon Papian, we are launching an application right now to the World Monuments Fund for Shushi, and I'm happy to report that it has received the endorsement of Europa Nostra. I know of several other projects in the works with various organizations for monuments in Artsakh. And this is important. I've heard about in my discussions and meetings worries about avoiding duplication and the importance of coordinating projects. I'm less concerned about that. I think action is the most important thing. My fourth point is that technology needs to be our friend, and it needs to be used to determine and share facts. I hope you all know about the excellent website called Caucasus Heritage Watch, organized by Lori Khachaturian, which offers satellite reports on the condition of many of the Armenian churches in Artsakh. Those of us who have been to Artsakh should be pooling our photographs, and we can even do digital work to recover imagery. I've done this most recently to discover various frescoes and inscriptions hiding in plain sight behind whitewash, including this detail of a fresco painting in a cave in Ani, the tomb of Tigranes, in which we can, if we look carefully and use software, determine that Christ is holding the open book of John 8:12 and the light of the world. This is the time for us, for those of us who can't get to Artsakh, to look as closely as possible at what we do have, which is photographs. This is not just for the sake of scholarship, it is heritage and advocacy too. And just another example of what one can do at a site like Koromos, which is of course off limits, but where one can use photography and software to recover, at least virtually, an image like this, Christ enthroned in the apse of Sweet Gibor. My fifth point is that we need to make friends with scholars. Heritage must go hand in hand with education. Education must go hand in hand with scholarship, and that is where our historians come in. Dadibank is a famous building. There are other beautiful, important monuments that are not famous. The more the public knows, the more they will care. I wonder whether, if the Juva Cemetery in Nakhchivan had been better known in its own right, and not just as a fatality of cultural genocide, but whether there would have been a greater international response to its complete erasure. Sixth point, Armenian churches are their own best advocates. They tell the most compelling story. It is an irony that Armenian art in the US at this very moment has never been better known, thanks in large part to the blockbuster 2018 Metropolitan Museum of Art show. Yesterday, my very first class of the semester in Armenian art had a record of 171 students and rising. If we can do good art history and tell compelling stories, I do believe that people will listen. Consider, for example, this vakas, or liturgical collar, from Drumis in Nakhchivan, held in the Armenian Museum in Watertown. It is now on display as part of a show I organized at Tufts, which is now up and running. And it's largely a show created by my students last spring. Students in this class learn not only about the astonishing needlework, religious iconography, and liturgical function of such objects, but also learn about them as survivor objects. In the case of the vakas, all we have left are a community and a monument destroyed by Azerbaijan. So we need to teach, not just the students, but colleagues, family, parishioners, public and policy makers. But we have for this purpose the very best material any teacher could ever want. So this conference is of the utmost importance, and I thank once more the organizers for all their help.